Welcome to Tequila Chats. Today's guest is the absolutely fabulous Bobby Hakakian. Bobby is the creative force and the creator behind the family-owned DDC Group, which is a collection of almost 300 luxury European brands across 5 showrooms in the United States, including the beautiful Minotti showroom here in Boston, where we are having our conversation. Bobby, thank you very much for being here. I know it took us a long time to get together.
Thank you for having me here. Really, thank you for having me in my own showroom.
No, I love it. I love this place, but every time that I come here, I want to take everything. I redecorate my home every time that I show up. And so, yeah, thank you for having this showroom in Boston. It's quite spectacular. But again, thank you for taking the time. I know how busy you are. I know that having, 5 showrooms right now in the US? Must be amazing. Plus, you all do all this creative work out of Italy, so I can imagine how your schedule looked like. So thank you very much. And welcome to Tequila Chats. So I know you chose the tequila.
Yes, I chose the tequila.
Why? Tell me, what is the story behind the tequila?
De La Familia is my favorite because it's an aged tequila. It's an extra old tequila.
Yeah.
It was originally made for
Smells
the
gorgeous.
family of
Yes.
Jose Cuervo. It's why it's called De La Familia.
Uh-huh.
And we started drinking this with my father and my brothers.
How much? Yeah, perfect.
Quite a few years ago, before anyone even knew what tequila was.
Uh-huh.
But I like it because it has sort of a very, it's almost like a cognac or a
It really does. It really does.
sip it, and since
It's
we're going to be here
beautiful.
for a while, it's
Why not do it?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And I saw the box, which is quite beautiful, and I was reading about the artist that actually designed the boxes.
It's a new artist that
Yes.
does the box. Yeah.
Yes, and I was reading Jorge Pardo, which is quite stunning. So let me give you the tequila. Cheers to you.
Thank you very much.
And again, thank you.
Cheers and welcome to our
Cheers.
showroom.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So, as I mentioned to you before, this conversation is really about kind of like learning from you, from your success. And one of the first questions that I always ask, which I think is really important, I think that where you come from and who you are truly determines what you do in life and what you do in business. And so that origin story, I know for me, we were talking earlier, I'm from Colombia. I know your wife is from Venezuela. I'm from Colombia. I came to this country, I always said it, people must be tired of this, but it matters. Came to this country with $25 in my pocket, barely spoke English, and I didn't go to college. None of that stuff has really stopped me from kind of like building the business that I have, but in some ways it has really informed how I built it, and it's become a very kind of like organic, it has a very organic form that really belongs to the way that I see the world and I see that business. And so for you, what is your origin story, Bobby?
Well, yeah, I'm an immigrant as well, just like you. I came here in 1978. Juan. I was 8 years old at the time, and I had a lot of difficulties like you had. I hardly spoke the language, even though I did go to a British school in Tehran. So I spoke just a bit of English, but very little bit. I was only in 3rd grade.
Yes.
So it was definitely a struggle coming here, and of course at the time my parents were struggling much more than we were, the children were, because
Yes.
at the time it was just myself and my younger brother, my partner in the business, and later on in the U.S. my 3rd brother was born. Of course they're both my partners, including my father.
Yes.
But it was much harder for my parents than it was for us, for them to acclimate, to adjust to the new environment, to learn the language. And
Yes. Yeah.
But we were sort of a bit on autopilot as kids because my parents really were just trying to make ends meet. And that was really their biggest focus. So I really didn't have much guidance for school, even though I really needed it because it was a new language for me and so on. They really couldn't help in any way. They couldn't like speak the language to even come to school and
Yes, you have to be part of that
I
process.
think part of developing what you were talking about, this sort of character,
Yes.
this sort of vitality, this steadfastness, is through that, through having difficulty, through not having everything fed to you on a silver platter.
It really does.
Even though back in Tehran, my grandfather was very wealthy. The interesting part is that he himself was lost his father when he was 9 years old. So he basically he was the oldest of 7 children.
Okay.
I believe it was 7. And he was the father. He became
the paternal
father.
figure. Yes,
Called Baba, which means dad.
Yeah.
So all of his younger siblings would actually call him Baba, which was interesting. Call him dad. He didn't have a dad, so he started to work at a very young age as a carpenter. And this is actually how we got into
That's how it is.
Furniture.
Because you are now in this third generation in terms of the business.
Third generation. Myself and my brothers are third generation. My grandfather started making furniture back in the 1930s.
Okay.
Back at Tehran, he was an apprentice for a carpentry shop where they did furniture. And it's a very long story. I could get into a lot of detail, but basically, I think that difficulty creates good character. And
it totally
that's why I think today, like, we have to be careful with our children not to be spoon feeding them too much.
Yes.
Because then they're not going to be able to survive in this world. And this world isn't fair. This world isn't.
Yes. Sometimes I don't understand that. Yes, for sure.
You need to give them some challenges in order to grow. And I think the challenge you had, the challenge I had, is what ultimately, develop the character.
Yes. I also think what it does, and tell me if this makes sense to you, is that as you're developing this business and building this business, because you don't have a format for it in some ways, the creative process, the creative part of building that business is an important component. And it keeps you not only motivated, but it keeps you always at the cutting edge of redefining what you are doing. Not redefining what other people are doing, but redefining what you are doing. And so, at least to me, that has been truly like the most interesting part of the entire process. I don't know if you relate to that, if that makes sense to you.
Relate to that, actually. I always say, in my business, I just always worked very hard, and I was always very relentless, in whatever it was I was pursuing at the time in the business. And the different types of the business, the pursuit was different.
Yes.
Because as businesses grow, you have to change and be dynamic enough to understand which direction to go to now, or what's the most priority now. But I think, as you said, it's I don't necessarily look at other companies to try to understand what to do.
Yes.
I focus within, and I really sometimes to a fault, where maybe I should be studying a little bit more of my competitors.
Yes.
It's not that I don't know my competitors.
No, you need to know. Yes, exactly.
But I really don't care what they are doing. I do what I think is right for us.
Yes.
And really, it's more about passion. It's more about the passion of what you're doing. And if you really love what you're doing, which I love what I do, thank God.
Yes.
I think you can be successful if you really enjoy what you do and you put that work behind it. I always tell my children, it's hard work.
It is. Yes, it is.
That
yes.
makes you.
It truly is. Yeah.
It's not. You're not smart. You're not born smart.
Yeah, I would.
Smart. It's not about. You can have some talent, of course, and I think as a kid maybe I did have some talent in design and photography. I like these topics, but for the most part, I think it's hard work.
Yes, it totally is. I was at a kind of like a speaking engagement. It was maybe a couple of years ago, and they were talking about the conversation was how do you build a business, a successful business, kind of like similar to what we're doing right now. And somebody in the audience came in and asked this question, how do you find work and life balance as you are building your business? And so the panelist was like, how old are you? The guy is like, I don't know, early 20s. And he's like, just get lost. Actually, he was a little bit more abrupt with the answer. Was just get lost. This is not the time for you to be thinking about that a life work balance. You will find that eventually after you put 20 years or so of building what it needs to be, right?
I agree.
Yeah. Because right now, it's in your business, the entire family is involved. I know that your brother Danny and C-Mac are part of that. Yes. Your role is more on you're a partner, of course, all of you are partners, but your role is more on that kind of like creative field, like a chief creative officer?
I wouldn't say I'm the chief creative officer. We all do a lot of different things. I think we just have different strengths.
Yeah.
And we use each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we mesh in the right way. It took us some time to get there. But to your point, I think hard work is what it takes, the balance comes.
Yeah, it comes at some point.
Because, when you're young, like when I was younger, I was working, 6 days a week. And literally, religiously 6 days a week for like 20 years. But when you have passion and you enjoy what you do, then it's easy. And that balance, you don't even think about the balance.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, you need that balance when you're, let's say, you have children, you need to spend time with the children. But prior to that, what do you need to do? You need to work, you need to play. And as long as you do them both well, you can have a, a great, if I went back to 1992, which is when I started in this business, the business started in 1991 or 90, end of 90 and 91. And I started very early on in 92 before this business was developed at all. And, I wouldn't change anything.
Yes.
I really wouldn't change anything. It was great. I worked hard. I played hard. I was living in New York City, and I'd learned a lot because I lived in New York City. That was one of the reasons why I was able to rub shoulders with a lot of creative people, with a lot of master architects.
You really have. You truly have.
I was very lucky to be in a city like New York.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I would have turned out the same way if I didn't live in New York City. And then, after college, I moved to New York City and I went back.
Yeah. But at this point, DDC, you're looking at, was it 300, almost 300 brands somewhere around under the umbrella of your company?
So that, we have about, let's say about 20, very, very, solid brands that we work with. That's the core of our business, but we have about 250 different brands altogether.
Yeah. But so what influences right now what you do?
In what sense?
In terms of, I'm very interested on the business perspective. Like, how do you see growth? Sometimes scaling is one of those questions that a lot of business people have in their minds as they are kind of like growing, but also in terms of the created point of view. You have 300 brands or so, right? There has to be some sort of like narrative that runs through all of them. Where does that influence come from?
It took a long time to get there, to get to these, 300 brands. But I think the influence comes from just, to a fault, I like perfection. I'm a perfectionist in a lot of ways. So the showroom for me was very important. The showroom had always had to be like precise, perfect. And the products had to be of the highest quality. There was no substitute. There was no, it was never a time when we said, let's carry something that's, maybe we have a better margin in that product, and let's carry that because it's a better margin. It was always, let's carry that because it's a better product.
The better product, yes.
It has better performance, it has better design, it has better craftsmanship, and it can stand the test of time. Basically, for me, the key word always was, and I explained this to our clients, was, what we are selling you today, what you're buying from us today is the antique of the future. It's something that
I love that. I do love that.
Down to your children.
Yeah.
To the family. It's not disposable, and it is the real thing. And it's going to really last.
Yeah.
And I think people, understand that. When
they do actually it is.
That, that's when they should have a shift in how they see home furnishings and design in general.
Yes. And how they perceive value as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
And in Europe, people really understand this much more than in the U.S. And I think it's changing in the U.S. now.
I think it is, yes. I really think it is.
Now people are starting to understand. I always say our furniture is not expensive. It's costly. Because there's a difference between costly and expensive.
Yes.
Right? So it's costly because it's of the highest quality, both in material, craftsmanship, and design.
Yes.
So in saying that, it's about the value.
Yes, it is.
People start to understand.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that you can literally have one of our pieces for one generation to the next. Like my Italian friends, we have an Italian friend who sleeps in his grandmother's bed. Literally sleeps in his grandmother's bed. It was handed down from the grandmother to the son.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
To the son. And now it's like the third generation.
Yeah, it is beautiful, yes.
And it's a beautiful thing. And this is what I like about our industry. It can really stand the test of time.
Yes, yeah.
When you do things in the right way.
Yeah. No, and is that perception of value, I think that is one of those elements that sometimes gets lost as you're building it because you're worrying about other things. There is a bottom line, there is a cash flow, there are all these elements that sometimes come into play as you're making decisions. Like for me, for example, the perception of value has to do with what we do. And for us, it's truly expertise. And it's the same thing for you, right? Your expertise is in many ways kind of like represented on the actual product. For me, the expertise is represented on what we do and we provide the client and how we move the client from point A to point C. But it's a really interesting kind of like process as to how you articulate that value and why people are willing. Yes, exactly.
If you educate a customer, I think then they can understand the perceived value.
Yeah.
So I think it's about education, but also I think it's about culture.
Yes, of course.
There's a lot of culture involved in there.
Yes.
That's why in Europe, the understanding of design is much higher. The understanding of quality of materials is much higher. People understand about materials.
Yeah.
When you go to Europe and someone is buying something, they look at the tag to see what is it made of.
Yes.
Is it made of a synthetic material? Is it
material? It's a different perception of what the value is.
They really understand materials.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in this country, the understanding of materials is a lot less. Like people just look at something and it's more from the outside, but they don't look like what's under the hood. You know?
But I also think that talk about culture, looking at a culture that is driven by trend. And so when you're driven by trend, then there is a need in some ways to change things on a regular basis. I think that when you look at cultures in which, like you were saying, this piece of furniture become heirlooms, or your jacket is an heirloom, right? Like, or whatever you have, your pair of shoes, something you're going to pass along to your kids in some ways. It's a very completely different perception of what that value is.
No, there's definitely, I mean, our industry moves with fashion. So we really follow fashion.
Yeah.
And there's going to be certain times, certain materials are going to be in, certain colors are going to be in, certain colors are going to be in, and certain times are going to be out. But classics are classics.
Yes, it is.
It's like anything else. There's certain things that just stand the test of time. And that's really our driving.
That's what you're driving.
To have quality products that are high performing, but can stand the test of time.
Yeah.
That means it's good design.
Yes.
It's good design, it can stand the test of time.
So let's talk about because every time that I talk to somebody in business, we talk about identifying a tipping point. You've been doing this now for over 30 years. Do you remember clearly your first tipping point? I know there are many, right? They come and they go, but do you remember that first tipping point or your most important tipping point in your business and what it meant?
You're right. I mean, there's not one.
Right.
There's many tipping points. But if I had to say there was one major tipping point in our business, it would have been the financial crisis of 2007, 2008.
In what way?
That actually propelled us.
Tell me, I'm curious about that.
Yeah.
So you would think it's the opposite, right?
Yeah, you would think it's the opposite, but it actually propelled us. Just there was actually two. So there was two. There was one in, I would say, 1999, and then there was another tipping point in 2007, 2008. These were two tipping points. The 1999 was because we lost our lease and we had been in business for about 10 years, since 1991, let's say, so about 1999 or so, but 10 years. And we were in the best design area in New York City, which was the design district back then, which was called the D&D building and the A&D building, Architects and Designers building on 58th and like 2nd and 3rd Avenue. That's where everyone was. Yeah. We had a beautiful 15,000 square foot showroom there. And we lost the lease, meaning the lease was coming up, but we couldn't make a deal with the landlord. And this was a blessing in disguise because we were forced to move. And that move, because we could have been very, complacent. People become complacent.
Yes, of course. You're used to, you have a routine. Yes, exactly.
You can become complacent, right?
Yeah.
But this forced us to move. And that move was a blessing in disguise because we moved from 58th Street to 34th and Madison Avenue.
Yeah.
And at the time, there was no other showrooms or furniture dealers or anyone in design in that area.
In that location.
As a matter of fact, that area used to be called the Dirty 30s. And I remember my father taking me there to that corner because we had a beautiful corner space. It was about 20,000 square feet. And he showed me and I looked up and I saw it. I said, oh my God, what a presence.
Yes. Yeah.
And we made the move. We had no choice anyway.
Yeah.
We made the move. We were all by ourselves. We had left the design area. We were all by ourselves. Today, the area we are in is called the Nomad Design District. We basically started.
You pioneered the whole thing. Yeah.
We pioneered the whole area. And the reason that happened was that second tipping point, which is 2007, 2008. So when we moved to the new location, it was 1999 to 2000, we hired Philip Johnson, very famous sculptor.
Oh, yes. Unbelievable.
To design our showroom.
Wow.
He designed our showroom. And we moved in and we had a beautiful thing going. And immediately our business went up about 20%.
Yeah.
And we were there, as I said, since 2000. And then 2007, 2008 came along. And our lease was coming up again. It was 10 years or so.
Yes.
So we started to negotiate with the landlord. And the landlord didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to rent it to us because they wanted to make the building, the whole building, that we had the retail space into a hotel.
Okay.
So they said, sorry, guys, we love you guys, but, we just want to keep it.
It's not for us now, yeah.
Because it's going to be the lobby entrance and it's going to be, it's going to be part of the hotel.
Yes.
So what do we have to do again? We have to for
another space. Yeah.
And it was right before the crash, the 2007-8 crash.
Mm-hmm.
And we did. And our landlord actually that owned the building, who had just sold the building that we were in, said, guys, don't worry. I have another building just south on Madison Avenue and 31st Street.
Yeah.
And we have 20,000 square feet there. We're going to give you guys a great deal. So we said, okay, great. We signed the deal. We started to, hire the architects and we get into the whole process of it. And the crash happened.
Yes. Yeah.
And we were already in the process of moving.
Yes, you're already doing. Yeah, in the middle of that. Yes.
We are now already in our new space. It's 2009 now, right? A year has gone by since the crash or so, but things are still not looking very good. But we hadn't moved out completely of the other space yet. We were still sort of moving out.
Yes, right? Yes. And that process, in between.
To go for the new space. And what happened when the crash happened, the company that owned the building, that had purchased the building, went belly up. They went bankrupt.
Okay.
And the bank came to us and said, hey, guys, please stay because, we would like you to stay. You're our biggest tenant.
Yes.
And so on.
That makes sense.
We said, well, can't stay. We're already committed to another space. We're moving. We're almost finished. We're moving. They said, well, we'll give you a deal you can't refuse. We said, okay. Let us know what the deal is.
Uh-huh.
And they gave us the deal we couldn't refuse. So we ended up having that showroom, which we were supposed to move out of, but 1,000 square feet on the corner of 34th and Madison, which was designed by Philip Johnson.
Yes.
Having our new space, which was designed by Rodolfo Dordoni.
Oh my God, you're working with the greatest. Yes. Yeah, you really are.
And all of a sudden we had both showrooms now because we said, okay, it was a deal we couldn't refuse. So now all of a sudden
40,000 square feet. Yeah.
40,000 square feet in the 3030s.
Yes.
Which is now called the Nomad Design District. But I think that was the tipping point, because that in itself, once we had created a 40,000 square foot of space within that area, everyone started coming. All our competitors.
Yes, of course. You created a space. Yes.
From all the different parts of the city, they were coming into the epicenter of now what we call the Nomad Design District, which, by the way, we own. We created Nomad Design District basically out of luck.
Yeah.
So a lot of times in business, you need to have that drive and that work ethic, but you also need to have a little bit of luck. And I had a little bit of luck, but you have to also be able to see it.
Yes, I was going to say, I think that the luck, you build the luck. That's been my experience.
Absolutely.
You build the opportunity is there, but you build the luck.
Absolutely. And it's very interesting that you said that, because a lot of people just think they can stand around and be lucky. That's not how it works.
Or sit around waiting for it.
I like that you said that you build your luck.
Yes.
It's just like you build your destiny.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah. And in English, destiny, we all know what destiny means in English. But in Farsi, in my mother tongue, the way you say destiny, you say it by saying two words.
Okay.
And those two words are sarnevish, which sar in Farsi means head, and nevish means to write. So it means basically write it in your head.
Yeah.
So what it's saying is, if you write something in your head, that will become your destiny.
Yeah, you manifest it.
And today, I think a lot of people are starting to understand.
Yes, there is that. Yes.
This sort of movement.
This movement on manifesting your
destiny.
Yeah.
It's not just, you stand around and your destiny is your destiny. You have to build your destiny, just like you build your luck.
Yeah. No, but it's very true. Listen, I started my business around the same time, right before the crash. It was like late 2005. By 2006, I started to see all these stories in the newspaper, in Boston Globe, all this stuff, that the market was going to crash. There was a bubble, all this stuff. And by 2007, the world went upside down. And so I learned my business in the worst of conditions, really in the worst of conditions. But that made me better because I had to figure out. I always said, well, the world was crashing. I was trying to build something.
You started what year with this business?
I was late up, really 06. I started the business in 05, but then I went on vacation, right? I didn't know.
So right.
Yeah,
right. Started and
yes, and then it just pulled away. But that was the best thing because there was no blueprint for me to follow. So I had to build my own blueprint. And that was really interesting. So that idea of pioneering, to me, it's always an important conversation with successful people, because most people have had to do that. There's an element in their career, in their business, that we might call it tipping point, but in some ways it's also pioneering on something.
Yeah.
Once the rug gets pulled off, or maybe the business is so innovative that nobody understands what you're trying to do.
Right.
But that pioneer, I think, is an important element on success, and that that ability to just shift in and adapt and create. I think that something that gets lost in the conversation on business is a role of creativity, in my opinion, because creativity is, has a
creativity is important, and being a pioneer is important, 100%. But I think there's three more important elements that every successful person has. At least me as an executive in our company, when I look at new people that we're trying to bring into the company, I look for certain things, and those things are very, very precise things. I look for good communication skills, for example. You have great communication skills. Great eye contact. Your hand movement. These gestures. That's great communication. And I think every smart business person, anyone who's successful, needs to have good communication. As a matter of fact, Philip Johnson. I have a great story about Philip Johnson because he taught me that. He basically taught me that through communication you can achieve great heights. And this was because when we got started in designing the showroom with him, he came up with this insane idea. And I'm going to keep it short, but let's put it this way. It was just a very, very provocative idea. It was basically these like torquing and twisting walls in the showroom.
Okay.
And we went there and we saw the project and we all loved it because it was very different.
Yes, of course.
And I remember we left, and soon after I said to my father, I said, wait a sec, we can't do this. He said, what do you mean? Why can't we do this?
Yeah, why not?
I said, because the walls are leaning in two directions and undulating and twisting and doing all these crazy things, which was beautiful.
Yes. Yeah.
He called it the cathedral, by the way. And I said, but then we can't hang anything on the wall. We can't put a wall unit against the wall. We can't, it's going to make our lives, crazy. He said, oh my God, you're right. Call Mr. Johnson's office, get an appointment for Monday. We got to go in. So we went in on Monday. And Mr. Johnson walked in, and as usually we'd say, hello, children, because we were all children to him, including my father, who at the time was in his 50s, who was basically my age. What I am today, I was then.
Oh, it's good.
And we said, well, Mr. Johnson, we love your idea, but it doesn't really functionally work for a furniture gallery, setting. And he said, well, what are you talking about? They rolled out a big roll of paper. He used a huge roll of paper, sort of semi-transparent paper with a big,
big notations. Yes,
he rolled it out on the paper right across from us, and they started to draw and speak and talk and communicate his ideas.
Yeah,
and his basic idea, premise was, look, you guys are selling gallery pieces. You're not just selling furniture.
Yeah.
And every single one of your pieces is finished all the way around. If you have a wall unit, the wall unit has a finished back. That's not raw on the back. It's finished. It's everything is such high quality that you should be able to see it from 360 degrees.
That way, yeah.
And we were like, okay. Okay.
How can you fight that?
We'll do it.
Right? Yes.
So we went in there thinking it's over. We're not going to do this project this way. We're going to have to change.
Yes.
And we went in, and with the great communication skills, he was able to transform our opinion immediately into going forward with the project. And I think that's a true sign of a great architect.
Yes.
There's a lot of great architects out there, but not all of them have great communication skills.
Totally.
And that's the key to anyone's success. So communication. And
What
then
is
the
the second
second one I would say is teamwork. Having teamwork, being able to work with other people, because it's all about teamwork. And then the last is problem solving. If you can problem solve, then you're probably going to be good at what you do, because you can find a problem, you solve the problem, and you move on. And you find another problem, you move on, and that's how you can achieve growth. So I think design is very important. It's my passion.
Yes.
But I also want to give credit to those other things.
Yes, of course. Yeah, and that's how you build the actual business. Otherwise, it's just
and innovation, as you said. So
yes, absolutely. So after, again, over 3 decades in this business and the success that you and your family, have accomplished, what have you learned from that success? What do you think is the most important lesson that you have learned? Lesson, yes, exactly.
It's a good question. So I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
What is the most important thing that I learned? Communication. I think that we just spoke about, but just having good communication, not just with your customers, but with your producers, with your clients.
Yes, of course.
With your everything around you. I think with good communication, high level communication, you can solve problems well. You can have better teamwork.
Yes.
And I think that's what I've learned the most, just having great communication and having being a little crazy, in the fact that, having a passion,
yes,
craziness of having a passion. And my passion is, good design, but really perfection. And you know, my wife always tells me there is no perfection.
Yeah.
And that is true. There is no perfection.
There is not, but
you know, in our industry, that's what we have to strive for.
Yes.
When someone walks into my showroom, I want them to look around and I want them to see perfection.
Yeah, same thing in my business. There is no perfection, but for me, it's all about the details, right? The details.
That's perfection.
It express expertise in my field. Yeah.
I mean, I used to walk around. I don't have the pleasure of walking around as much with clients as I used to when I was younger, but I used to literally walk around with clients, but walk them through the showroom like some of these, you know, architects. And as we're walking through, if I saw like a piece of lint on the velvet, I couldn't resist.
I know, Mike.
So, you know,
I'm just in there for Bethany and Ashley are back there like saying it.
But you know, the interesting thing about that was that, you know, it's this OCD behavior, but my clients loved it. They saw that. They were like, wow, you know, we really want to work with this guy because he's detailed, you know.
No, totally.
He's detailed,
Yeah.
you know.
No, I feel the same way. Listen, in my business, details are what matter. I think that, I'm gonna say this, you could go there and regurgitate something that you learn and position yourself as an expert, but the expertise really is expressed on knowing that minutia, knowing what needs to go here and not go here, and about what, you know, why moving the piece of lint is important in terms of the experience to the client. All those things are truly what.
Well, that lint itself is probably not that important, but the whole notion in your own mind to want to have a perfection.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, we're in sales, so part of what we have to do is storytelling.
It is,
you know.
Yeah, it's emotional, right?
That's actually part of the storytelling. Believe it or not, that is actually storytelling, because you're telling the customer, wow, you know, I'm very detail oriented.
Yes.
And that's part of the storytelling. Yeah. It's not just, you know, your pitch on oh, you know, you should buy this for this reason or whatever. No. But when they really see that pure storytelling, where it's not even a vocal storytelling, it's like a physical storytelling.
Yes.
You know, that's when you really, I think, have captured your audience.
Yes, and it's also that emotional component that comes with that.
That's correct. Exactly.
Is that moment in which people fall in love with this chair? Doesn't matter what the price is or anything. They just love it because if something about it was the way that it needed to be.
That is true. But trust goes a long way, and I think trust comes through having the expertise. It is knowing the details, having the expertise, being an expert in your field. Yeah. And that when they trust you, then you have a carte blanche.
Yeah. Right. Absolutely. So, Bobby, what have you learned from your failures?
Man, there's been many.
Don't we all?
You just have to keep getting up, you know. That's what I've learned is you got to keep driving at it. You have to keep working at it, and you can't give up. And you have to be steadfast, which I've said that word a few times. I'm trying to drive that word into my children. Yeah. Just to be relentless, you know, not accepting failure. And I've learned it through failure. I've learned to be in that way through failure. Right?
Yes, it is.
You have to fall to get up. Yeah. But you have to get up.
It just absolutely.
Lick, you know, I always say to my kids, you know, you have to lick your wounds. You know, you have to just like just get up, lick your wounds, and walk it off, and keep going.
Keep moving. Keep moving. Yes. Yeah. Learn to learn from that.
Don't be stagnant. You know. Keep going.
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as we conclude the conversation, by the way, it's been wonderful. Thank you very much. What would you say is the key to success?
In our case, with our family business, it's the family. The key to success was our family, and everyone working hard, working well together, working, and you know, it wasn't always easy. You know, when we were younger, I think the brothers had a little bit more turmoil. Yeah. But as we got older, I think we learned to work with each other better. But it's all about teamwork and family teamwork. That's really our success. And my father was also a great businessman, so he taught us a lot about business. So we're a design company that understands business. So there's a lot of design companies that don't necessarily understand business. They only understand design. Yeah. So we're a design company that really gets business, and we understand that, you know, in order to make good business, we need to, it has to be a two-way street, meaning both sides of the equation have to profit.
Yes, of course.
And I think that's something that we learned through the family, and without my family, I don't think this would have been possible.
Well, that's beautiful. That's a fantastic way to end this conversation. Bobby, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheers to you, to your family, to your success. Thank you for the conversation today. Learned a lot.
Lovely having you here.
No, wonderful. Thank you. Beautiful showroom. And to you guys, thank you for watching, and salut. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. So make sure that you go right now and then you like, you share, you comment, and you subscribe. And so see you next episode. Salud.